My work here is pretty simple. Uh, I don't come as a bearer of bad news. I come as somebody who is going to show us the very obvious. There's a big number that's going around in the continent. Everywhere Africa is mentioned, this number is mentioned. In fact, you heard it just a few minutes ago. By 2050, the continent doubles its population size. There's an idea behind it. We call it the demographic dividend. This idea is the idea that there is a potential for amazing economic growth when the working population of a nation overgrows or grows over the dependent population. So in this case, when you see the youth and those who are in a working order grow over them that are young and elderly. That is the very core, the very idea of the demographic dividend. And every single place that you go and Africa is mentioned, the youth demographic dividend is also mentioned. My thesis today is Africa does not have a demographic dividend. We have a demographic dilemma. And I want us to explore that for a minute. So, 24 years from now, our 1.6 billion people doubles. We're going to have 1.25 billion people as young people, people who are in the workforce. However, my challenge is that the continent is currently building for the next 5 years. And that is where we have a problem. Our startups are optimized for the next quarter. We're thinking about ROI in the next 12 months. Nobody seems to be thinking about the next 50 to 100 years. Our education across the continent is building people for jobs that do not exist yet. In fact, the bigger problem is our education is not even building for people for jobs that exist now. We already have a gap in that. Talk less jobs that do not exist yet. We look a lot at apps that we've built, a lot of which do not exist after 18 months. How many of us are still using any of the apps that we were using in 2014, apart from the big five? Can you show by hand? They come and they go. We're not building institutions, things that survive, things that go across a long spectrum and caters to our need as a continent. And that's what I want us to think about today. So, I'm not an alarmist. I'm not here to scare you. I'm not a futurist that predicts doom. I just wanted us to look at the data. We've seen this before. This is not the first time. In Syria, somewhere in 2011, unemployment hit 25%. Young people couldn't earn income, they couldn't build their futures, and they didn't have anything to live for. They revolted, they protested, it became a revolution, and it disrupted the entire nation of Syria. In 2010, a young man whose cat was seized by the police set himself on fire. His name was Bouazizi. That one act sprang forth what became known as the Arab Spring. It sent shockwaves across the Gulf region and affected more than 8 countries. Then, between 2018 and 19, Sudan saw the same thing. Sudan, by the way, is still a war-torn nation. In Sri Lanka, they invaded the presidential palace, they swam in his pool, and they took videos from his bedroom. It was young people who were sick and tired of a system that did not build with them in mind. In 2024, Gen Zs took over Nairobi, Kenya. Let me repeat that for emphasis. Not working unions, not organized systems of protest. Gen Zs took over Nairobi and said, we are sick and tired of the fact that we did everything you asked us to do. We got educated, we got the degrees, we were patient, and we waited, and this is what you're showing to us. 5 different nations, a small number of people, youth in their millions. This is what happened. Here's a question for you to think about. What happens when 1.25 billion young people come to the same crossroads? That is what I want you to think about. Would we see a continental-wide Syria, or can we do something about it? So, before you disregard me and say, that's another doomsday guy, I know their type, I know futurist, all they do is say funny things, I want us to look at the data, and most importantly, my humble track record. About a decade ago, I stood on stages just like this across the continent. I've had the opportunity to speak across about 18 countries in this continent. And I told them that here are emerging technologies that are coming, and here is how it would affect our continent. I spoke about flying taxis and how that would disrupt transportation and real estate, how it would disrupt traffic systems. And 10 years ago, they laughed at me. They called me a sci-fi buff. Somebody who was privileged, who had eaten and was satisfied and was saying things that felt good to him. I spoke about self-driving cars and what that would mean for our economies, humanoid robots and the future of work. In fact, I did more than 4 tours across universities on the continent to tell young people, please do something about your education. Again, they laughed me to scorn. Now in 2026, January, we have self-driving cars on the roads of Ghana. In a video that I released recently, I asked a very simple question about how our constitutions are not even built for the world we're in. How many of us agree with me that there are self-driving cars on our road? By show of hands, have you seen the Teslas and the BYDs and the rest of them? Here's a question for you to think about, sir. If a self-driving car gets into an accident when there's nobody sitting behind the wheel, who do we blame? Is it the company that built the car? Is it the software that is running the car? Or is it the passenger who was not sitting behind the wheel? Our constitution hasn't thought about this. 10 years later, my predictions on banking is playing before our very eyes. On the continent, mobile money has leapfrogged every single metric of traditional finance. And more people are accessing financial services through mobile money infrastructure than they are doing with traditional banks. Remember, 10 years ago, they laughed at me. I spoke about the singularity, the idea that one day we'll have intelligent systems that are altogether more intelligent than the entire human race. We started paying attention about 4 years ago with the advent of ChatGPT, but you're beginning to see conversations around AGI. And even though we're far from it, companies like NVIDIA and breakthroughs in technologies like quantum technology gives us something to think about. Here's my humble boast. 10 years ago, they laughed at me. But 10 years later, I was right. Here's something for you to think about. What if I am right again? If I was wrong about self-driving cars and flying taxis, the worst that would happen is that you could laugh at me and just don't take me serious. But if I'm right about 1.25 billion people inheriting chaos and what can happen, we have our very continent crashing before our very own eyes. This is not something we can ignore. So, here's the point that I want to bring you to. North of here, just about 200 kilometers in Kumasi, sits this object. Uh, History anchors it somewhere in the 1700s. The architecture that built this was a leadership idea that we were going to put the very soul of the Ashanti kingdom in this, and that this would represent not only a symbol, but it would become an institution and a system that would outlive every leader and would outlive every leadership framework. 200 years later, in the 1900s, the British governor demanded to sit on this. The brave Yaa Asantewaa went to war for it. 3,000 people died because keeping the system and keeping the institution running was far more important to them than even their lives. Today, 324 years later, this artifact still stands. My challenge to you is to say that as a people, institutional building is not new to us. In the highlands of Ethiopia, again, Amla built a system in Ethiopia. That system ran for 700 years, from the 1200s to the 1900s. The arc of history tells us that Ethiopia was the only nation that was never fully colonized. Why? Because they built institutions. They built succession systems. They did not build for 5 years. They built for 50 to 100 years. So, there are two things that lays ahead of us. We can keep going the way we're going. Build for 12-month exits, optimize for ROI in 12 months, build startups that can be acquired, and keep doing what we're doing. And in 5 years, may God help us, we shouldn't see a continental Syria. Or we can flip that, and we can build the greatest workforce the world has ever seen. If you think the Asian tigers, the economic population that transformed Asia is anything, you have not seen what the people of Africa can do. But in order for this to happen, we need to start doing things different. This is the reason why I came. This is our last warning, because we have a 5-year window. I'm not casting doom. I'm not forecasting doom. I am showing you math. By 2030, that youth dividend that we speak about, they are already teenagers. And the math is irreversible. We have 5 years to change everything from ground up. And you and I need to pick up that work. So, are we going to go path A? Or are we going to choose the secondary path? Like I said, in path A, we keep doing it as we are. In path B, we stop everything and we start rebuilding our systems from ground up. We need to rebuild our education systems for jobs that don't exist yet. We need to stop optimizing our governments for 4-year cycles and election rounds. And we need to start thinking institutionally. How are we going to build things that will outlive us? When I think about 2050, a lot of us think about a number. 2050 is not a number. 2050 is a young person in this room. It is a young boy in Lagos who is 16 years today. In 2050, he would be 40. What you and I are building would be what they inherit. We've seen what happens when they inherit chaos, when they inherit unemployment, when they inherit no purpose for their lives. As you sit in this room, I do not want you to cast your mind to governments, to leaders. I want you to say, what am I building that the next generation would inherit from me? If Africa's demographic dilemma will become Africa's demographic dividend, is going to start with architecture. It's not going to be slogans. It's not going to be mottos. It's not going to be conferences. It's not even going to be buzzwords. It's going to take architecture, painful architecture. It will feel very difficult in the beginning, but the end goal will serve it. Here's what I leave you with. A wise man once said, the truth of wisdom is to build trees under which shade you will never get to sit. To put the seed in the ground and let the tree start growing. And if you want to know if you've really built something great, then it should be that when this tree is fully grown, you might never get to sit under its shade. Africa's problems will be solved by Africans. Here's my final words to you. If you're not part of the solution, I came to tell you you're part of the problem. Thank you.